It's been 10 days since the Washington Post reported Donald Trump shared classified intelligence with Russia. Now the president is calling for an investigation into a whole new set of intelligent leaks to the media. British officials announced this morning they will no longer share information with the U.S. about their investigation into Monday's deadly suicide bombing in Manchester. As you know, 22 people were killed, dozens more injured in that apparent terrorism attack.
The decision that's been taken is not to, I think, suspend any sharing of information. It's just information related to this particular investigation.
Right, okay.
Because, we quite frankly can't afford to risk it anymore. It has been compromised by the leaks. We can't afford any more.
Photos of evidence published in today's New York Times appear to have been the tipping point. But the UK has had concerns for several days after American media reported on the death toll, the method of the attack, and the bomber's identity, all before British officials were ready to release the information. Israel's defense minister also said yesterday his country has changed the way it shares intelligence with the U.S. following Trump's sharing of its information with Russia. So what does this all mean for America's global reputation and its ability to keep us safe? Joining me are Juliette Kayyem, host of the Skiff podcast on the faculty at the Kennedy School, and a GBH and CNN contributor. Good to see you, Juliette. Jim Walsh is from MIT's Security Studies program. Jim, good to see you, too. Let me start with you. This leak here, they won't share information, as we just heard, just narrowly about this Manchester thing. Is that a big deal or just an unfortunate moment?
It's unfortunate. It has happened before. It happened in 2005.
Based on what?
Again, this was a British attack on their transit system, and U.S. Officials were the source of a leak then, also of photographs. So it's happened before. It's not the end of the world. It's not a good thing. When the British say they're irritated in their understated way, that tells you something.
That was
means
their
they're
word
livid.
Yesterday.
They're livid. So it's not good.
Is it worse than not a good thing?
I think it is, because
Why?
I think you have to view these things as cumulative. And so you have Trump's statements in the Oval Office to the Russians about what we now know was probably Israeli asset. You then have, confirmation in his conversation with the Philippines president that he disclosed our nuclear capabilities in North Korea. And then you have this. And so each of them may have a separate explanation, but you have to look at all this stuff cumulatively. And I think and remember, these are our allies. Israel and Great Britain are allies. They are looking at this cumulatively and concerned. And then, of course, that will impact in the future intelligence sharing.
Well, that's
I would disagree a little bit
with
here,
what?
though. I mean, I agree that psychologically it could have a cumulative impact, but clearly there's a big difference between a president who can't stop talking and then leaks that come from the bureaucracy or officials in the FBI or elsewhere. And I think
two of the three things she just mentioned were out of his mouth.
Exactly. And I think that's a different.
I don't think we know where the leak came from.
You mean vis-a-vis this UK
so I don't
thing?
think
I agree with that.
Yeah.
That could
But
be
regardless,
anywhere.
if it's in the administration, Juliette and I have had this discussion. I'm the head of intelligence in another ally. And I say, okay, Duterte and the nuclear thing, the UK and the bombing, Israel's intelligence. I don't know if I'm sharing this stuff with the head of intelligence in the U.S.
I agree with that. I think
so. That's a really dangerous thing, isn't it?
That is bad. But to put it, I'm not known as a defender here, but to put it in some context, the U.S. has, at least when it comes to signals intelligence and other forms of technical intelligence, the best intelligence in the world. Countries are not going to want to give that up. But yes, it makes them reluctant, and there might be something where it's that last shred of evidence that connects the dots that we don't get because people are reluctant to share things. So I do think it's bad. I'm hoping it's survivable, that we can get by even with these problems. But the real problem is him. He just cannot stop talking.
Well, let's speak about him. Forget allies for a second. You work for the president in the intelligence community. Aren't you reluctant to share information with him, too?
I think, yeah. I mean, anyway, so look, there's going to be sources and methods intelligence, and then it creeps up, and then, eventually, you're getting someone's getting the presidential brief, cabinet secretaries are getting it. So, and it might have sources and methods, it might not. There's no reason that someone would need to know sources and methods at the level of policymaking. And so, yeah, you would be reluctant from the intelligence agency apparatus. Why do we need to disclose this to the White House? Look, when an attack happens like in Manchester, what happens is it's sort of all hands on deck. So there's a series of phone calls going on. There's CIA briefers telling the cabinet secretaries what's going on. So we don't know where this leak happened. All I know is the conditions for a presidency are set in the White House. And what I do know, looking at this White House, is he either doesn't know, is incapable, is sloppy, or is purposeful in the disclosure of intelligence that our allies are giving us.
Well, speaking of purposeful, he had a purposeful ally moment today with his colleagues at NATO. Here's the President of the United States.
NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations. But 23 of the 28 member nations are still not paying what they should be paying and what they are supposed to be paying for their defense.
You know, my guess is that while there were 23 plus people, we saw some of them who were not really happy. I'm betting a lot of people at home are saying, go for it. If we're paying our fair share, whatever that means, let them pay their fair share, too.
I think it's an important message that President Obama made, that President Bush made, and actually maybe a better way to put it with our allies is we thank you for your continuing cooperation, because a lot of the countries are ratcheting up, and we urge you to do further.
So is your only problem the in-your-face nature of this?
Well, one is, like this is the Putin talking points, right? In other words, the one person I do know who is happy by that speech is Russia and Putin, because one, it was antagonistic without the commonalities that actually unify us. And the other part of the speech does not recommit to Article 5, which is the basis of mutual defense, which is what brought the European countries to fight with us in Afghanistan when we were attacked at 9/11. Here's the irony. He's standing in front of the 9/11 memorial when he says that. It's at some stage, I'm just laying it out there.
I bet you're not going to disagree with that, are you?
Well, I think Trump is right to say that the Europeans have been lax in meeting their 2% of GDP targets. That's true. Now, they actually, as Julia points out, they've been getting better at it, primarily because of what's happening in Ukraine and on the European border with Russia. What was disturbing to me about this, and she is also right, that the one thing that the Russians want more than anything else is division between NATO and the United States. That's their number one policy goal for Europe. I would say, though, and I don't mean to pile on here, that what he said from a policy stance was disturbing to me. He was saying that NATO should focus on terrorism and immigration. You know, the Defense Department doesn't do immigration. NATO doesn't do immigration, and he doesn't mention Russia. And what are the Poles and the Latvians and the Lithuanians and all the others? Who are they concerned about? They're concerned about Russia.
By the way, piling on is allowed under certain circumstances here. It's fine. You know, speaking of, I'm going to try to do this segue here. Speaking of meeting with these leaders, there was a moment where there's some debate about whether or not the president actually shoved the prime minister of Montenegro. But that was like there it is. That is like a love tap compared to what this Republican candidate
for
Congress.
What kind of love tap is that?
Well, from Montana.
Tell us more about your practices.
Most of you have heard this tape of this confrontation between this guy, Gianforte, who wants to be the congressman from Montana. He may be at the end of the day, and this reporter for The Guardian, Ben Jacobs. Here it is again.
And we'll talk to you about that later.
Yeah, but there's not going to be time. I'm just curious if you have the
speak
right
with
now.
Shane, please.
But you don't.
Sick and tired of you guys. The last time that came in here, you did the same thing. Get the hell out of here. Get the hell out of here. The last guy did the same thing. You were the Guardian?
Yes, and you just broke my glasses.
The last guy did the same damn thing.
You just body slammed me and broke my glasses.
I don't know if I'm overreacting to this. A lot of different things affect different people. This one totally put me over the edge.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of the same question I asked you in the beginning. Should this be seen as an outlying kind of moment, or as I see it, further indication of the death of civility in this country?
I think it does begin at the top. I think there's a tone out there that's set by the president and the way he talks, but I'll tell you why it's a big deal. Because maybe you could say, oh, it's a crazy congressman out in the West. Is the Republican national leadership is like pathetic. I mean,
Ryan eventually said the guy should apologize.
Pence will not answer, but our vice president of the United States will not answer the question, do you stand by the endorsement? And so whether it's a shove or not a shove, I'll tell you about the NATO picture. The most important thing to remember is by tradition, the U.S. president actually comes out first. And so in some ways, their willingness to go ahead of him was actually probably that they didn't respect him. I mean, so the former ambassadors are talking about, you know what, normally he would have come out first.
So I only have 30 seconds left. Am I overreacting to this Gianforte thing?
Well,
I don't mean to the incident itself, but to what it represents.
Maybe you're overreacting, but I do worry. Personally, I do worry that everyone is more emotional, more on edge. And
even if it's only words, by the way.
And this is, I'll take it to a darker space. One of the things I worry about this, all this emotion being unleashed and the harshness and the bitterness and the anger, I'm afraid someone's going to take a shot at him. Someone who feels intensely, maybe someone who has psychological issues, might take a shot at the president because of the environment in which all the emotions are so extreme. God, I hope that doesn't happen. But that's where I'm in agreement with you. It is a different emotional and ideological tenor today than any time I can really remember.
We got to end there. Jim, it's good to see you. Juliet, as always, be well. Thanks so much.